Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. I want to consider a couple of short related lists that are found in the texts. The first one is the 3 ways in which human beings surpass the Devas. I think it was a fairly recent talk 2 or 3 weeks ago. I talked about the preciousness of human rebirth and the rarity and great good karma to take a form as a human being. And so this is kind of related to that. It's 3 ways in which the human birth is more fortunate than birth as a Deva. The Devas surpass humans in respect of lifespan, power, beauty, and sense pleasures, enjoyment of pleasures. But human beings surpass the Devas in the 3 things: mindfulness, courage, and the opportunity to practice the Dhamma. Mindfulness, which here is given as satimant, the possession of sati, or mindfulness, is the faculty of being present, of remembering to be present, of being clear in the mind, being awake, being free of delusion. And it's not that human beings by any means are perfect in sati. I mean, we have any individual, unless you're a arahant or a Buddha, you're going to have ups and downs, and you're going to be more mindful at some times than at other times. But this faculty of mindfulness has the potential, at least in humans, to be developed to a high degree. Whereas with Devas, they don't have nearly that ability because they live in an environment that's so full of kind of wonderful things and pleasures and sort of magical experience that, they're in a state of kind of happy delusion all the time. So they don't have the opportunity of the human beings do to develop this faculty of mindfulness. Likewise, in the lower planes, beings in the animal realm or the ghost realm or the hell realm, they also have less ability to develop mindfulness. In the hell realms particularly, they're so overwhelmed by suffering, they don't have any chance of getting a clear mind. So it's almost the same as the Devas in that respect, but from the opposite end. One is overwhelmed by pleasure, one by pain. But in both cases, the mind is not clear. So mindfulness is, or sati, is a mental quality that comes up often in the different lists and in suttas. It's one of the real central qualities of Buddhist practice, is developing mindfulness. I've heard this from some of our monks that they, in their teaching and their writing, they don't like to use the word mindfulness anymore because it's been sort of debased in the popular culture to mean something different. But if you understand it to be the translation of sati, then you can't go wrong. And I think that's a good general principle, to go back to the original concepts and try and avoid connotations that get kind of attached to the English words. Sati, in some of the older books, it was translated as recollection or recollectedness. Recollectedness is kind of an awkward mouthful, but it's actually closer etymologically to the meaning of the word, which has a relationship to memory. In Sanskrit, the word for sati is smriti, which is also used for memory. And I think the best short definition that you can give for sati is remembering to be present. When you have sati, you remember where you are, what you're doing, what the object of consciousness is, what your intention is. All of these things are clear. There's a story from the writings of Uspensky, who was a student of Gurdjieff. I've always found his stuff in general more accessible than Gurdjieff's directly. And he talks about a practice that they used to do of remembering themselves and really remembering to be present. And he says that if you're not fully mindful in our terms, if you're not mindful, you sort of forget that you're present. You're in a crowd or in a room with other people, and you're focused on the other people, and you kind of forget that you're part of that picture. You kind of lose yourself in the externals. Right? And they would make a practice in this Gurdjieff group of practicing this, always remembering that you're part of the picture. Because you don't see yourself, maybe you see your body if you look down, but generally you're looking out, you're seeing a scene. You kind of forget you're there. And he says that he was diligently practicing this one day in Copenhagen, where he lived. Walking down the street on his daily rounds and business, whatever he was doing, he stopped in at the tobacconist to get some pipe tobacco. And he started getting interested in the different blends and chatting with the clerk and smelling the different tobaccos. And he got lost in the sensuality of it, and he kind of forgot his practice. And then he says it was more than half an hour later, I suddenly remembered to be present again. And I was several blocks away walking, doing something else. And I felt like everything in between was sort of a dream that he really came to. That whole way that Ouspensky talks about it is not the language we would use in Buddhism, but I think it still captures the real idea of sati, that you're remembering to be present. And that's not possible if you're overwhelmed, if you're totally confused by the externals and by whatever's going on externally, whether it's pleasurable or painful. It makes it very difficult to maintain mindfulness. So that the Devas have that handicap relative to us. The second one is courage, which is given by the word sura, which has a etymological root with surya, the sun. So courage is the kind of the quality of fearlessness. Abhaya is fearlessness, and courage is having the strength to not give in to fear, which is said to be a defilement that causes a great deal of confusion, and it's one of the factors that the Buddha said you should not make any decisions based on fear. You shouldn't make decisions based on greed, hatred, fear, or confusion. There's a sutta where the Buddha talks about overcoming fear in the practice. He said that if fear arises while you're sitting, don't stop sitting until you've gotten past the fear. If fear arises while walking, don't stop walking until the fear subsides. So this short teaching, I think, can be interpreted in two ways. One is literally, it's a general idea in meditation. If fear arises, then don't change postures. Keep working with it. But the other thing I think is in a more metaphorical way is you don't run away from fear. You face it down. This is the quality of courage. You face it down and go through. There's one saying, on which I have to admit I forget the source of this, but somebody said that the way out is down and through. And this comes up in many ways. In meditation, one of the more subtle obstacles that really only occurs in deep meditation, it's not a trivial thing, is the kind of the fear of the abyss, that the mind is coming up to the point where it can let go of ego and it backs away. It's too scary. It doesn't push through. And that takes that kind of warrior spirit, that courage, to go through. The Buddha was himself, he was a Khattiya, he was from the warrior caste. And a lot of his metaphors and similes are based on warrior things like cutting through. Mindfulness can be thought of as a sword, and training the mind like training an elephant or a horse for battle. A horse or an elephant that's taken into battle has to be courageous as well as the humans to keep disciplined and keep in focus even in the midst of noise and chaos. And the Devas are not possessed of great courage. Their wars with the Asuras are described, they're almost comic opera kind of a thing where they easily take fright and run away from whichever one. It's more like you're trying to frighten the enemy into running away. And sometimes the Asuras will take fright, and sometimes the Devas. And they're said to be very low casualty wars. It's specifically cited. That they fight like village boys with sticks, or like mountain goats butting heads. They don't have that courageous, and I suppose also the ruthlessness of human combat. But also in more higher level kind of courage, they're lacking. It's said when the Buddha teaches the Devas, which is one of his qualities that he teaches in the Deva realm as well, when he teaches the Devas, only a few of them take the teaching seriously, are able to absorb it. There are some wise Devas, but most of them become frightened and they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear particularly about impermanence. Their lives are so long, they kind of fall into the delusion that they're immortal, and the Buddha tells them, no, you're not. You're going to pass away, and it frightens them, terrifies them. So not all human beings, of course, have courage all the time, but we do have that capacity. We have the potential to be very courageous, even in the face of death and dissolution. Human beings can show courage. And the third quality is abramacharya, which is in the human realm, there is the capacity to practice the Dhamma, or practice the holy life. It's stated that here in the human realm are where the Buddhas and the Arhants arise, and the Pacheka Buddhas, and not in any other realm. And it's only here that the Eightfold Path can be practiced in fullness. In the Deva realm, there are some Devas that attain to stream entry, but it's rare and it's more difficult than for a human being. And we have the opportunity here to practice the Dhamma, and it's here in the human realm that the Buddhas arise. So the Buddha's teaching originates and is expressed and practiced most fully in the human realm and not in any other. So that makes the attaining of awakening or enlightenment much more possible in the human realm than anywhere else. So anyone who wishes or desires a celestial rebirth in the heaven realms is really um, shortchanging themselves. They're going for a very much lesser goal. The other list is a list of 4 factors, and these are given as the factors that a layperson, if they possess these 4 factors, they need not be afraid at the time of death. These are the factors that will ensure a good death and transition to a new birth. The backstory to this particular list is that the Buddha was speaking to the Yaka Alawaka. And it's quite a colorful story. I won't go into the whole thing here because there's several layers to it actually. But a Yaka is this kind of demonic ogre-like being, and as Alawaka did, they often capture and eat human beings. They're very much like the ogres in Western mythology. And sometimes, as Alawaka did in the end of the story, they do get tamed and converted and become protectors of the Dhamma. And you'll see in temples in Thailand, for example, you'll see these monstrous statues outside the temple, guys with like dog faces and big teeth. Those are yakas that have been turned into guardians of the Dhamma, and they're keeping away all the other demonic beings. This Alawaka was a particularly powerful yaka, and the Buddha sought to convert him and make an end of his habit of capturing and eating people. And there's quite an elaborate story about the different challenges that Alawaka tried to scare the Buddha away, and with all kind of magical powers, and the Buddha was unmoved. And in the end, Alawaka says to him, I'll ask you some questions, and if you don't answer them correctly, I'll pick you up by the heels and throw you out of the world system. And the Buddha said, I don't see anyone amongst humans or Devas or Yakas or anyone who could possibly do that, but I'll answer your questions. And Alawaka had, the story is that he had this scroll in his storeroom that was passed down in his Yaka family from the time of a previous Buddha, when one of his Yaka ancestors had an encounter with the Buddha of that time, and they would ask him a bunch of questions and wrote the answers down. And Alawaka goes through these questions, and the Buddha answers everything exactly the same to the last syllable as the previous Buddha. So that converted Alawaka. He was really impressed by that. He asked to become a follower of the Buddha. And this was one of the questions. How can a layman be assured at the end of his life of a good death and rebirth? And the Buddha said he has to have these 4 qualities, which was Satya, Dhamma, Ditti, and Chago. That's truth, righteousness, courage again, but in a different word. Could be translated maybe as heroism, and generosity. So the first quality is truth, Satya, and that's a quality that's very much emphasized in the Buddhist ethics, the importance of truth. It's the prime quality of right speech, is speaking the truth. It's the most important quality of speech. And it's one of the paramis, which are the innate virtues that we develop that we can carry on from lifetime to lifetime. It's like a possession. And the speaking of truth is always emphasized as very important. And truth, Satya, would also include being true to yourself, not fooling yourself, not telling yourself comforting lies, but facing reality. It's the karmic result of not speaking the truth, of being a liar, is madness. And, the mind, by sowing confusion, the mind becomes confused. I've actually seen this in somebody I knew when I was young who was a really inveterate liar. He would tell lies when there was actually nothing to be gained from it. It was just this habit, just to make, didn't see any reason to tell the truth. And when he got old, he went quite mad. He could no longer tell reality from delusion. And then the quality of speaking the truth is, the karmic result is having a high intelligence and clear wisdom. Dhamma, or Dhammo in the nominative form, is a very multivalent word. It has a lot of different applications. And in this case, it's taken to mean righteousness, or if you want to relate it to other use of Dhamma, it's like living according to the Dhamma, living in the way of the Dhamma. So living righteously, keeping the precepts, being compassionate, being honest and straightforward and helpful. This is living according to Dhamma. So it's Dhammiko, one who is living according to Dhamma. Diti is another word for courage, and it's D-H-I-T-I. It's not the same as Diti, which is almost the same pronunciation, spelled differently, which means a view. It's nothing to do with that. It's courage, or the internal fortitude to face obstacles and not be afraid, not be cowed, to carry on. And Chago is generosity. There's another similar quality is Dana, which is generosity. But Dana is more like a generosity of giving, the sense of giving. And Chago can include that, but it's kind of broader than that. It's like unselfishness, or giving in a broader sense. I mean, like giving your time, or giving kindness, or just being generous and helpful to others. This is Chago. So these four qualities: truthfulness, righteousness, courage, and generosity of spirit, are things that, when you come to your deathbed, they'll serve you in good stead. I don't think anyone comes to their deathbed and wishes that they'd been more selfish, or more deceitful in their life. If you have these four qualities, one of the things that will benefit you even before the moment of death is a lack of remorse and regret. If you're living righteously and truthfully and with integrity, with courage and openness, then you're not always feeling sorry and remorseful for things you've done. You can be happy with and content with your existence. You've lived correctly. So I see these two lists, they're quite parallel. One is a list of those particularly human qualities, really the good aspect of being human, the really noble aspect of being human, of having mindfulness, courage, and the ability to live the holy life, or practice the Dhamma. And the other one takes it maybe a step further and says that if you are human, how should you live? What should you do with that legacy of karmic legacy of being human? And you try and live in a purified human way, which is based on truthfulness, courage, generosity, and the righteousness.